Hi, good evening, and welcome to Dhijah's Unfiltered Life. This is our first official live, and I'm super excited we're doing this, guys. Please join in and let's have a meaningful discussion this evening because there's a lot to talk about. Okay. So we're still on this controversies involving Daddy Lumba and his family brouhaha. I'd actually wanted to do it in parts, but looking at it, I think the story is just overwhelming. So the best I could do is to come on live and then explain it all to you. So on this note, I think we should dig in, and afterwards, I'll make sure I get the recording and then make it public so that anyone who wasn't able to join this live would equally benefit from it. So So today I'm going to carefully walk you through the controversies that surrounded the family of Ghanaian high life legend Daddy Lumba after his passing. Okay, so let's refresh our minds a bit. Yeah. So Daddy Lumba, whose real name is Charles Kojo Fosu, died on 26 July 2025, leaving behind a musical legacy that spans He left behind a musical legacy that spans decades of that spans decades and includes some of his most iconic songs in Ghanaian high life history. But after his passing, what happened? It was followed not only with mourning, but there were also serious disagreements within the family, ranging from legal battles to court issues and even traditional authority interventions, which we all know about. But don't worry, guys, as we're here today, I'm going to walk you through all that. Tonight, we will examine the entire timeline. So if you haven't been following, after today's live, you'll be abreast with everything that has happened so far. So just take and stay with me. Well, so let's start with the death of Daddy Lumba, and well, it all started with his death, and it all started, I think all these issues started with the planning of his funeral, right? So when the death of Daddy Lumba was announced, that was somewhere in July 2025. This news really shocked Ghanaians because, yes, some of us knew, and I'm sure majority of you knew Daddy Lumba wasn't well and all that. But his death, well, it's God who gives and he equally takes. So who are we to complain? God knows best, like we always say. But when his death was announced in July 2025, the news shocked the Ghanaians and the wider African music community, I must say, because Daddy Lumba was a global legend. So over 3 decades, he had been one of the most influential high life musicians, producing timeless hits like Aben Waha, Teresa, Yentiobia. That's one of my favorites, actually. So fans, musicians, and politicians paid tributes to him, describing him as one of the most important figures in our Ghanaian music history. Yeah. So naturally, expectations were high that his funeral would be one of the biggest state-like celebrations of life Ghana had ever seen for a musician. Because just like I mentioned earlier, Daddy Lumba is a legend, not just in Ghana here, but I would say worldwide because people listened and enjoy his music. Ghanaians in the diaspora, like he was widely known. So within the family, preparations began for a large funeral ceremony to be held in Kumasi. But before that, there was a 1 week observation that was held in Accra, which we witnessed. A candlelight ceremony was held, and everything went on beautifully, if you would remember. But under the Akan tradition, funerals are normally supervised by a Busiapenyin, meaning the head of the extended family. And in the case of the Fosu family, the Busiapenyin was, I don't know if I should use was or I should say is. But you get it that. So if you don't understand why I'm using was or is, I'm contemplating on using was or is, you would understand as we dig in deeper. The family head was Ebusiapinyin Kofuusu, popularly referred to as Tupac. Now others refer to him as what is it? There's this name they refer to him as now, but we will get to that. But very early in the processes, tensions began to emerge. Some members of the immediate family felt they were not being properly consulted in decisions about the funeral arrangements. And that disagreements later exploded into major legal disputes. So one of the most dramatic developments occurred when Akosia Sewa Fosu, who is identified as Daddy Lumba's legal wife, went to court. She filed the case at the Kumasi High Court seeking for an injunction to stop the funeral arrangements. Her argument was simple but very powerful. She claimed that she had been legally married to Daddy Lumba in Germany in 2004, under a monogamous marriage recognized by the German law. So because of that, she argued that she was the only legitimate surviving spouse. She had the exclusive right to perform widowhood rites, and the funeral should not proceed without her involvement. And guys, you know that under the monogamous marriage it means that the Lumba could only marry once. He can only marry once. He can have concubines, but he cannot have a second wife. But assuming he was married traditionally, for that he could take as many wives as possible, and no one would frown to that. So since he was still married under the German law, it only means he would have one woman being recognized as his wife, and any other woman would be considered a concubine per the argument. And if the marriage certificate is accepted, that is what it was supposed to be. So let's move on. So in her court documents, she accused the family leadership of deliberately sidelining her from the planning processes. And in this case, referring to Ebusiapinyin Tupac because he was at the helm of affairs. So she also warned that the musician's body should not be removed from the morgue until the court had determined the legal issues. This legal action shocked many fans because it suggested deep division inside the family. So that wasn't all. Another figure at the center of the controversy was Priscilla Oforiatta, popularly known as Odobroni. She was also widely known to have had a long-time relationship with Daddy Lumba and was recognized by some few family members as being together. But those family members that were recognized, and I would say those family members included his sister, his older sister, Brimpoma, Akosia Brimpoma, his younger sister, because he even named some of his children after her. So they knew she was in the picture, but none of them could attest to the fact that he married her. So they knew he was with her, he had kids with her. But for marriage, none of them were present, and none of them could attest to the fact that he actually married her. But they knew they were together, they lived together, and they had kids. So because of this, a major dispute arose over whom should be recognized as a rightful widow. While Akosia Sewa insisted she was the only legal wife, other family members insisted that Odobroni had also lived with the musician as a spouse. This disagreement turned the funeral preparations into a legal and cultural dispute about marriage recognition and widowhood rights. So eventually, the case reached a critical moment. The Kumasi High Court, presided over by Justice Dorinda Atta, dismissed. So an injunction was filed here. So under the court presided over by Justice Dorinda Atta dismissed the injunction application that sought to stop the funeral. The judge ruled that stopping the funeral will not be in the best interest of the family or the public, especially considering the cost of keeping the body in the morgue. So the court therefore allowed the funeral preparations to continue. And this decision means that the burial plans could move forward despite the disagreements, um, but that did not end the tensions at all. The conflicts continued. At the same time, another disagreement was developing within the extended family. Daddy Lumba's elder sister, Ernestina Fosu, accused the family head, Kofi Usu, that's Ebusia Penyin to Park, of making decisions about the funeral without consulting key family members. And key family members in this case is referring to Madame Akosia Brempoma, his immediate uncle, and then his immediate uncle and some of the family heads, including the chief of Prakuso, because it was said that he didn't inform him, he didn't notify him of the death of Daddy Lumba and all that. So so the situation escalated so much that she invoked a powerful traditional oath known as the Ntamkesi. Under the Ashanti traditional practices, invoking such an oath requires the matter to be brought before traditional authorities for resolution. So the case was therefore taken to the traditional council associated with the Asantehene for resolution. So the dispute eventually reached the traditional authorities linked to the palace of Otumfuo Osei Tutu II, the Asantehene. After deliberations, the traditional council reportedly ordered the dissolution of the original funeral committee and called for a review of the arrangements. The council also acknowledged that some matters, particularly disputes about widowhood rights, were already before the courts, and therefore they could not be decided by traditional authorities. Right. This intervention shows how serious the family division had become. Then it continued. So, in the midst of all this about the funeral not holding and all that, in the middle of all these disputes, the children of Daddy Lumba decided to release a public statement. These children included Kelvin Fosu, which is the oldest of the kids, Shaolin Fosu, and Sierra Fosu. They made it clear that they did not want to be involved in any legal battle surrounding the funeral. They emphasized that their focus was simply to honor their father's memory peacefully. This statement was widely praised by the public because many people felt the disputes were overshadowing the musician's legacy. Right. So it didn't end there, guys. It continued. So we then moved to another major development involving the funeral funds. Some family members filed lawsuits seeking to prevent the release of the body from the funeral home, and also to freeze the Lumba Memorial Foundation account that was used for funeral expenses. They alleged that money might have been withdrawn without proper authorization. And they also asked the courts to replace the signatories on the account and ensure transparency. This added yet another layer of tension to the already complicated situation. But finally, the funeral did take place. So despite all the disputes, the family eventually went ahead. The funeral rites took place in Kumasi, drawing thousands of mourners. But before that, I think we remember the courts granted an injunction to the family, but within 24 hours, it was overturned. It was then said that they had to pay an amount of money to Ebusia Penyin to cater for the losses he had incurred. And if that amount of money isn't paid within a separate a certain amount a certain time given, then it means he could go ahead with, and the money was huge, so they couldn't pay, so the funeral had to proceed as planned. Yeah. So despite all the disputes, the funeral eventually went ahead, and final funeral rites took place in Kumasi, drawing thousands of mourners. So among them there were there were musicians, but not as much musicians that as we would have expected to do this thing, because some of the notable musicians we saw was Nane Champon, there was Brother Same, Well, there were few musicians, and there were political figures, there were politicians, and some fans gathered to celebrate the life of one of Ghana's most iconic entertainers. For many people, the event was emotional because Daddy Lumba's music had shaped their lives for decades. But even after the burial, the family disagreements did not completely disappear. But before I continue, do you think the disputes with Daddy Lumba's family were avoidable? Or should famous people prepare clearer estate plans to avoid conflicts? Well, this issue is really overwhelming, but then it's important we discuss, because as we discuss, we take cues from it, and then I believe we learn from it as well. We learn from it, and then with that, we can equally shape our lives with it. So, after the funeral, like I said, things didn't end there. We still, don't forget, we still had court cases pending. So not long after that, Akosia Sewa was in the country. That is the legal wife of But did I forget? Did I remember to mention that after the court, the legal spouse issue, the Justin Dorinda Atta ruled that both women were wives and they should both perform the distance. So both Akosia Sewa and Odo Bruni were recognized as wife under customary law. So Akosia Sewa wasn't able to attend the funeral. So she visited Ghana after the funeral was done, after the funeral of Daddy Lumba, and attention gradually shifted from burial to arrangements to control and management of his estates. And when a person dies without a clear will being publicly executed or confirmed, the law normally requires someone to apply to the courts for authority to manage the deceased person's property. And this legal authority is called letters of administration. So in simple terms, letters of administration gives people the legal rights to manage the properties of a deceased, pay debts and obligations, protects the estates, and eventually distributes the assets to beneficiaries. And in the case of Daddy Lumba, Akosia Sewafosu, who had earlier identified herself as the musician's lawful wife, filed an application at the High Court of Ghana seeking to be granted these powers. Her argument was based on her claim that she had been legally married to Daddy Lumba in Germany in 2024 under monogamous marriage recognized by German law, and because of this, she believed she was the most appropriate person to administer his estate. If the court granted her application, it would have given her significant authority over matters such as houses owned by the late musician, bank accounts, royalties from his music, business interest, and intellectual property rights. So, considering the massive influence and success of Daddy Lumba over the decades, his estate was believed to include very valuable assets, making the question of administration extremely important. And guys, I don't know how true it is. It was rumored that in most of Daddy Lumba's properties, he acquired most of these properties even before meeting Odo Bruni, and most of the in most of the properties he actually has it bears both him and Akosia Sewe's name, but this is not verified. We don't know how true it is, so it's just rumored. So we would say it's alleged. Yeah. So as she was still seeking letters of administration, it did not go unchallenged, yes, because lawyers representing Prisla Oforiata, popularly known as Odo Bruni, quickly filed a caveat in response. A caveat in legal terms is essentially a formal warning to the court not to proceed with granting certain authorities until objections are heard. By filing the caveat, the lawyers were effectively telling the court that please do not grant letters of administration to this person yet, because there are serious objections that must first be considered. The caveat meant that the court could not immediately approve Akosia Sewe's request. Instead, the matter had to be examined carefully because other parties were claiming an interest in the estates. This issue. So this is it. So the basis of for the objection on the side of Odobroni and her lawyers were that the lawyers for Odobroni argued that the situation surrounding Daddy Lumba's marriages and relationships were more complicated than what had been presented in the application. Their position suggested that Odobroni had also lived with Daddy Lumba as a spouse for many years. She had children with him, and she also had legitimate interest connected to the estate. Because of these factors, her legal team believed that it would be unfair for one person alone to be granted authority over the entire estate without the interest of others being considered. In estate matters, courts are usually very careful to ensure that all potential beneficiaries and interested parties are heard before making decisions. This is why the caveat became a powerful legal tool in the disputes. So, for many observers, the estates dispute was one of the most sensitive parts of the entire controversy. That is because the estate of Daddy Lumba is believed to include several important assets, including real estate properties in Ghana, valuable music royalties, Charlie, and intellectual property rights to his songs, possible international assets connected to his time abroad. However, administrators of the estate could play a major role in deciding how these assets are managed and eventually distributed. This is why both sides were determined to ensure that their interests were protected through the legal system. So when the news to his estate disputes became public, reactions were mixed. Some Ghanaians sympathized with Akosia Sewa, believing that the lawful spouse should naturally have a strong role in administering her husband's estate. Others felt that the situation should be handled carefully because Daddy Lumba had children and other family members whose interests must also be protected. Many commentators also pointed out that the estate disputes were very common when a prominent figure passes away, particularly when questions about marriages, children, and property ownership arises. Yeah. So this were all things that happened after the funeral. But it didn't just end there. More happened. More happened. So after the funeral, what else? There was an issue that there was this issue of one party, Akosia Sewe's side, the immediate family saying they had no idea of where Charles Kojofosu was buried. And others saying, but let's remind ourselves, guys, when the immediate family were objection and putting an injunction, seeking for an injunction on the funeral, Ebusiapenyin Tupac came out to tell us that they should allow them do their funeral. And in his words, if I get him right, if I'm quoting right, if I'm not mistaken, he said they could decide to do as many celebrations as they like afterwards. After the funeral, they can also hold their funeral, because I remember at that time there were 2 dates. The date for Ebusiapenyin was out, and then there was equally another date for Papashi, and then they also had another date that was somewhere in March or so. But so Ebusiapenyin was like they could also go ahead and do their funeral and all that. But all this now there's a change in plan, I think, because now, after all this, there has been a plan for celebration of life. And after this letter of administration, we didn't really hear much about the caveat and all that afterwards. Then at some point, we heard that there were plans to of the family to organize what they described as a celebration of life event, yes, to honor the late musician. According to reports circulating at that time, some members of Daddy Lumba's immediate family and close associates were planning to organize a large event to celebrate his life and musical legacy. And this event was expected to bring together musicians who had worked with him, fans and industry figures, friends and supporters from across the country. The idea behind the event was to celebrate the enormous cultural impact that Lumba had made on Ghanaian music over several decades. However, the plan quickly ran into strong opposition from the Busiapenyi of the family, Kofi Owusu, popularly known as Tupac. So, as the recognized head and extended family head, he argued that no major family event connected to the late musician should be organized without the full involvement and approval of family leadership. From his perspective, organizing such an event without proper consultation would amount to bypassing traditional authority and disrespecting the role of the family. According to people close to the matter, the Busiapenyi believed that the timing and structure of the proposed celebration were inappropriate because certain traditional mourning processes had not yet been fully completed. But guys, celebration, I don't think Akosia Sewe's side were the first to organize a celebration of life, because I know there were some celebration of life that had gone on in several parts of the country. I think in the UK there was a celebration of life organized by, I heard they had approval from Ibusiapenyi and Daddy Lumba, and rumors had it that some of the fans that they made, what they made from the celebration, they sent a share to the family and all those things. They sent their portion of the whatever to the family. So it raises a very big question as to why Ebusiapenyi suddenly has objection on his wife, his legal wife, and then his immediate family planning to celebrate celebrate their brother or mourn him the way they also deem necessary. The way they also deem necessary. So also celebrating him the way they deem necessary. So a moment, guys, come in. So in our Ghanaian culture, especially under the Akan traditional tradition, mourning rituals follow specific stages, and organizing celebratory events too early can sometimes be viewed as cultural insensitive. So, because of this disagreement, the situation escalated into legal battles. So, in response to the planned event, the Busiapenyi reportedly took the matter to court and filed for an injunction to stop the celebration of life program from taking place. An injunction, in simple terms, is a legal order that asks the court to temporarily stop the action until the dispute is resolved. By seeking an injunction, the Busiapenyi was essentially asking the courts to prevent the organizers from holding the event until the issue of authority and consultation was properly addressed. His position was that the extended family had not approved the event. The Busiapenyi had not been properly consulted, and organizing the celebration without family consent would create confusion about who the authority over matters related to Daddy Lumba, over who had the authority over matters related to Daddy Lumba's legacy. Supporters of the Busiapenyi argued that the move was necessary to protect the dignity of the family and ensure the traditional protocols were respected. However, supporters of the celebration events saw the situation differently. They believe that event was simply meant to honor the life and achievements of a national icon and therefore should not be blocked by internal disagreements. And like I mentioned earlier, guys, they equally believe that others who weren't even immediate family had gone ahead to celebrate Daddy Lumba in various ways. So why was Ebusiapenyi now objecting and even going to the extent of putting an injunction on it for his immediate family not to celebrate him? So it's when I heard it, it was kind of I thought it was weird, but well, there's let's continue. We'll get into it later. It's Fashion Week. Okay. So so let's continue. So when the news of the injunction attempts became public, it sparked widespread discussions across media platforms. Many fans of Daddy Lumba felt disappointed that disagreements were overshadowing efforts to celebrate the life of the musician who had given so much to the Ghanaian music industry. Some commentators argue that the situation highlighted a deeper tension that often arises in Ghana between traditional authority structures and the modern entertainment industry. And in the entertainment world, celebration of life for artists often happen quickly and are organized by industry stakeholders. But within traditional family structures, decisions about such events are expected to pass through family elders and traditional leaders. This difference is an expectations these differences in expectations may have contributed to the conflicts. So, so I think the broader impact of this dispute for many observers was that the disagreement over the celebration of life events became one of the early signs that the family was deeply divided on how to manage the legacy of Daddy Lumba. It also revealed the complicated intersection between family authority, cultural traditions, legal rights, and public expectations surrounding a national icon. As the situation continued to unfold, it eventually fed into larger disputes that later involved court cases, traditional authority interventions, and disagreements over the estate of the late musician. So, guys, it didn't end there. Let's move on. It didn't end there. There's more gist. Um, so after all this was happening, it sparked a lot of conversation. People thinking like Daddy Lumba is truly a legend because legend in life and legend in death. Because his legendary status didn't just end after he died, but it continued. This time even more. This time it was. Hmm. So, guys, like I said, it didn't just end there. Oh. There were new disputes after the burial ceremony had been completed. So many Ghanaians expected that the tensions within the family would gradually calm down. However, the opposites appeared to happen. Reports began emerging that disagreements within the extended family were actually deepening, particularly around leadership of the family and control over matters related to the late musician's legacy. At the center of the dispute was the position of Ebusiapenyin, which is the head of the family. Under the Akan customary practice, the Ebusiapenyin plays a very important role, right? The person that is the Ebusiapenyin is responsible for the following. First, is responsible for representing family in public matters, presiding over disputes within the family. But here there are disputes happening and it's not the dispute is not resolving soon. Okay. managing family properties and inheritance issues, supervising funeral rites and major traditional ceremonies. So for the family of Daddy Lumba, the person occupying the position was Kofi Owusu, popularly known as Tupac. But following the funeral, some members of the family began questioning his leadership. Some relatives reportedly accused him of failing to properly consult other family elders during the funeral arrangements. Others claimed that there had been communication breakdowns and disagreements over certain decisions taken during the burial process. In short, they were trying to say he's an authoritarian. He wasn't involving, he doesn't discuss with any immediate family members. He was solely taking decisions on his own without the consent of any immediate family member, therefore disregarding their views and disrespecting them. These tensions eventually led to a major development. So, at some point after the funeral, reports circulated that certain elders within the family had taken steps to destool Ebusiapenyin, Kofi Owusu, popularly known as Tupac. Destulment in traditional terms means removal from traditional leadership position. According to those who supported the decision, the move was taken because they believed the family needed new leadership to restore unity and trust. They argued that the controversy surrounding their funeral had created divisions that required a reset in the leadership of the family. However, the decision did not receive universal acceptance. Supporters of Tupac strongly rejected the claim that he had been legitimately removed from office. This created two opposing camps within the family. One side claimed Tupac had been properly destooled, and the other side insisted that he remained legitimate Obusiapenyin and that any attempts to remove him was not valid until customary procedures was not valid under customary procedures. So guys, I hope you now understand why I was contemplating on saying on addressing him as Ebusiapenyin or former Ebusiapenyin. I guess my confusion has been established now. But before that, guys, if you're watching and you haven't yet subscribed, please click do subscribe and click on the bell notification icon so you can stay connected to future discussions. Subscribe, join the community, and let's grow together, guys. Please subscribe. So let's continue. So the other side insisted that he remained the legitimate Ibusiapenyin, and this disagreement created a situation where two narratives were circulating at the same time, each supported by different family members. So after the first family meeting was held at Pakoso to distool Ebusiapenyin, there was a second family meeting. So in response to the distillment claims, another group within the family reportedly organized a separate meeting to address the matter. At that gathering, supporters of Tupac argued that the earlier meeting that supposedly removed him did not follow proper traditional protocols. They maintained that Tupac was still recognized Ebusiapenyin, and any attempts to remove him had to follow strict customary procedures. The earlier meeting was not authorized to make such a decision. So during this meeting, some members emphasized the importance of maintaining unity within the family, especially because the late Daddy Lumba remained a national icon whose legacy needed to be protected. The existence of these two parallel meetings highlighted just how deep the internal division had become. Guys, as all this was happening, there was also something happening with the Ga traditional chiefs. So as the controversy continued to grow, the issue reportedly drew the attention of the traditional authorities in Accra, particularly leaders connected to the Ghana Traditional Council. The concern reportedly related to certain allegations involving events that were said to have occurred at Daddy Lumba's residence within the Ghana traditional jurisdiction. Among the allegations circulating publicly were claims that some unusual activities had taken place at the residence after the musician's death. Because of these claims, traditional leaders reportedly decided to invite Ebusiapenyin Kofi Wusu. And some of these activities were about the rumor that Daddy Lumba was buried at the residence, at his private residence in Italy. In Italy. And how did this rumors come out? It was first brought to the public by Efiashas Nega, who mentioned it in her life. And after that, during the court injunction, after Ebusiapenyin Tupac filed an injunction against the celebration of life, a family member at the court confirmed that he was buried at his private residence at Eslegon. And Ebusiapenyin himself, in an interview, equally confirmed that he was buried at his residence at Eslegon. So the Ga traditional leaders needed him to come and answer some questions because per their traditions, they are designated places for burial, and you can't just bury someone in a private residence without doing the necessary customary right, or consulting the appropriate authorities, because they believe it has dire consequences both on our health and even spiritually. So the needed customary rights and certain things had to be done before that could be done. So they needed Obusiapenyin Kofi Wusu to come and then answer some questions. Okay. So because of these claims, traditional leaders reported invited him to come and answer some questions. So in traditional settings, such invitations are taken seriously because they allow elders to hear both sides of the dispute to establish the truth. However, according to reports, Tupac did not appear before the council on the scheduled date, so his absence triggered another development. So there was a press conference by the Ghana traditional leaders. So following the failure of Tupac to appear before them, leaders connected to the Ghana traditional authorities reportedly held a press conference. During the press briefing, they expressed concern about the allegations and the failure of the individual involved to honor their invitation. Traditional leaders sometimes resort to public communications like this when they believe the matter has become a public concern that requires clarification. The press conference attracted media attention and further fueled public discussions about the ongoing disputes within the family. For many observers, it raised questions about whether the issue had now moved beyond a private family matter into a broader traditional community concern. So so basically what they raised on the this thing, they made it known to the press that they had issued a letter to Daddy Lumba. They've issued a letter to Ebusiapenyin, invited him to appear before them. That was on Thursday, this Thursday 12th March, which he didn't appear, and that they had heard rumors that he had been distilled. And they made it clear that their concern wasn't anything private, but their major concern was about they cared more about their land. Yes. So if he has been distilled, it means someone will be replacing him. So they are extending an invitation to the extended family to come to see them, and then they will see how they can do to resolve this issue. So that was basically what the press conference was about. But after that, another development that reportedly took place was a visit by some Ghana youth groups to the residence of Daddy Lumba. And such visits by the youth groups are sometimes symbolic gestures meant to demonstrate community concern or solidarity with traditional authorities. According to accounts circulating in the media, the visit was intended to show that members of the community were taking the allegations seriously and expected clarity on the matter. It also showed that the issue had begun to attract attention beyond the immediate family circle. So the youth wanted to confirm if truly Lumba was buried there or not. But unfortunately, when they went, they per video circulating, they met the mother of Odobroni, who also said she had been standing outside the gate for she didn't live there, and she's been standing outside the gate for a while and no one was opening, so she believes there's no one in the house and all that. So she left, and then the youth left, but they later came back, and then they met a police officer who said his madam, which is Odobroni, wasn't at home and all that, but issues that happened afterwards I wasn't privy to, so I wouldn't be able to speak to that. So so after that, it just didn't end there. So just yesterday evening, what also got here was that one of the most culturally sensitive developments that reportedly involved ritual actions carried out by Ghana queen mothers and the traditional women leaders. Yes. So in many Ghanaian traditions, women elders sometimes perform symbolic rituals when a matter is believed to have spiritual or moral implications for the community. So such rituals are often intended to firstly invoke spiritual protection for the community, to call for truth to prevail in a dispute, and third, symbolically cleanse a place believed to have been affected by conflict. So reports suggest that these women leaders performed certain traditional rites connected to the controversies surrounding the residents of Daddy Lumba. However, details about these rituals remain limited because such ceremonies are often not fully explained publicly due to their cultural significance. So, as the news spread, public reactions across Ghana became intense. Many fans of Daddy Lumba expressed sadness about that disputes were continuing even after the musician had been laid to rest. Some commentators argue that family disagreements are not unusual when prominent person dies, especially when issues of inheritance, leadership, and tradition are involved. Others, however, felt that conflict should have been handled quietly to protect the dignity of the late musician. Across radio, televisions, and social media, discussions continue about how best to preserve the legacy of one of Ghana's celebrated high life legends. But guys, did the issue end there? You may ask, how far with the court injunction? How far with the celebration of life? Is it ending there? No. News reaching us this evening is that a club has been launched by the immediate family. That's Akosia Brimpoma, Ofayao, Owusu, and the rest. They've launched the club for the celebration of life ceremony, which gives us the assurance that it will be coming on live and colored. But questions that I'm asking myself is that with the court injunction, Ebusiapenyi filed that injunction with the capacity of being the Ebusiapenyi. So if truly he's been destooled, will that injunction still hold? Will he still have the right to continue with that injunction, or will that injunction that injunction will be withdrawn? So the lawyers in the house, if you could educate us on that, we would be grateful. So for this issue, it seems it's not ending anytime soon. The issue of Daddy Lumba is not ending anytime soon. But as usual, we are here to feed you with any new updates that comes with it. So guys, please and please again, I'm pleading that you do subscribe to Dhijah's Unfiltered, because as it is now, my life has just been activated. My life has been activated after attaining certain subscribers, but I still don't have full access to stream completely. So for me to get full access, I have to hit a certain number of subscribers to get full access, so I can give you full experience of the live stream. So guys, please don't just watch. Please subscribe. Help this channel grow, please. Please subscribe, like, share, click on the bell notification icon, and let's grow together. Okay, guys. So, as we bring today's discussion to a close, one thing becomes very clear. The events that unfolded after the passing of Daddy Lumba shows just how complicated things can become when a person who has had such a powerful impact on society leaves the world. So, from disagreements within the family to court cases to traditional authority inventions, and even debates about how his legacy should be celebrated. The journey after his passing has not been easy one at all. But beyond all these controversies, there is a much bigger story that should never be forgotten. That story is the life of the and the legacy of a man whose music touched millions of people across Ghana and beyond. For decades, Daddy Lumba's songs spoke about love, heartbreaks, life struggles, and hope. His music became the soundtrack of weddings, celebrations, quiet moments, and reflections, and even difficult times. And that is why, regardless of disagreements that have surrounded his funeral arrangements, his estate, or the leadership of his family, the truth remains that his contribution to Ghanaian music is permanent. Legends may pass on, but their influence never truly disappears. The real question now is not just about the controversies we have discussed tonight. The real question is about how his family, his fans, and the music industry will work together to preserve and protect the legacy he left behind. Because in the end, the greatest tribute to Daddy Lumba is not the court battles, not the disagreements, and not the headlines. The greatest tribute is ensuring that his music continues to inspire generations yet to come. So, thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I do not take this lightly. So, if this conversation gave you something to think about, I would appreciate you subscribing to Dhijah's Unfiltered and clicking on the bell notification icon so you can stay connected to future discussions. So, until next time, stay informed, stay reflective. Good night.